Welcome to another edition of the Crimson Creed podcast. I'm Sam, along with my co-host, my brother Chris. Chris, what do you know this fine Thursday evening?
Nothing too much. The Bears are playing tonight, which means the Bears are going to lose tonight. They are
Yeah,
horrible this year.
you may
But
lose twice this weekend.
gosh. But yeah, that's about all I know. How's life?
It's good, man. It's good. Um, Two trivia questions here for you. So I've got this calendar and it shows me a trivia question each day of the week. What video game character was originally known as Jumpman?
Jump man. Is it gonna be Mario?
It is. In the
Hmm.
original release of Donkey Kong, he was Jumpman the plumber.
What
Interesting
else
little
would it
tidbit
be?
of knowledge. And one more, appropriately fitting for this week. What is the softest mineral found on Earth aside from Texas Longhorn fans?
That was gonna be my first guess. Softest mineral. Would it be gold?
No, talc. In powdered
Talc.
form, talc is commonly used in cosmetics from eyeshadow to blush, regular parts of my daily routine. Um,
Well, I can sleep now that I know all that.
yeah. So uh, coming off the weekend, OU beating Iowa State 50-20, improving to 5-0 overall, 2-0 in conference play. Um, Definitely an exciting way to see the weekend go. I know there were some concerns early on, giving up 10 points apiece in each of the first two quarters, but being able to pitch the second half shutout there, um, keep Iowa State's offense off the board. That was pretty big. What stuck out to you in this one?
The main thing that stuck out to me was the defensive adjustments, that on top of the wide receivers. We knew in the offseason that Emmett Jones was going to be a big hire for OU. We began seeing evidence of that when I'm not sure if you can hear the siren going by. We began to see evidence of that when he started bringing in recruit after recruit after recruit after recruit. He made recruiting receivers look easy. But if you think about last year, all the passes that our receivers dropped, especially like Jalil Farouk and Marvin Mims, who both had quite a few drops, our receivers didn't look too good last year. And at the beginning of this season, I was saying that our receivers were one of the biggest question marks coming into this year. Almost every contested catch or contested pass, they're going up and catching. I mean, they've been phenomenal. And then the defensive adjustments. Uh, if I'm getting my numbers correct here, I remember texting you about this during the game. On the first 5 drives of the game, including the drive where we got a pick six, OU allowed 258 total yards. The rest of the game combined, which was 8 more drives, I think we allowed 94 or 97. And only about 10 of those were the last couple drives of the first half. So Brent Venables, he's really showing, unlike last year, that he can really adjust well defensively.
Yeah, he is. He is. And I think one of the most promising signs last week was the pressure we were able to get on Rocco Becht. He was running around all over the place behind the line of scrimmage for a lot of that game because of the pressure we were getting back there. Um, I think we had some issues with secondary play exposed a little bit early on there because we gave up a couple of really long plays. And as impressed as I was with the defense through the course of that game, facing the adversity early and getting their mind right in the second half, that's going to be something you can do against Iowa State. You can do against Baylor, right? You can give up a couple big plays early, get yourself into a little hole, but dig out of it. Where we're not going to be able to afford to do that is this weekend against Texas. The first quarter is going to be really key this weekend, I think. And I think we're going to have to look for some improvement in the things that we saw early in the Iowa State game. Excuse me. See the safeties over the top, cover that deep post, deep in route that burned us a couple times, and on the perimeter, see us be able to clog up the zones a little bit on the perimeter. Um, Just little things that burnt us a bit against Iowa State. Overall, the whole defensive unit for OU deserves some praise for last week. Again, pitching the shutout, giving up a total of 352 yards, which isn't great, but like you said, probably 260 of that came in the first 39 minutes of the game. So I'm just, I'm not terrible. I said first 30, I meant first 29 minutes of the game, but um, it's just it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell you, someone who's just been phenomenal. If you look at their numbers alone, you'd think that this was a potential first round NFL draft pick. If not, at least at some point they would be drafted in the NFL. You would have them in the top 5 of the Heisman conversation at this point in the season. You'd say without a doubt they are one of the best players in their position in the country. That stat line, I'm going to let you tell me if it is Dylan Gabriel or Quinn Ewers. This person has thrown 157 passes, 118 of them were completed. That's 75.2% completion percentage. The average defensive ranking they've gone up against is 55.8. I'm sorry, no, that's the rush defense. Forget I said that part. They've thrown for 1,593 yards, averaging 10.1 yards per pass. They have 15 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. What quarterback am I describing? Quinn Ewers or Dylan Gabriel?
Knowing you, I'm going to err on the side of this being Dylan Gabriel.
That's Dylan Gabriel. He's put up remarkable numbers. I saw something earlier saying that last year on throws 10 to 20 yards down the line of scrimmage, or 10 yards and beyond past the line of scrimmage, he threw with like 40% accuracy. Right now he's at 67. And he's just seriously improved. He's torching defenses left and right. He had a couple underthrows last week, but they still connected because of the work Emmett Jones has done. Dylan Gabriel is the biggest reason we lost to Texas last year. He's not the only reason. I think we were going to lose that game either way, but not having a quarterback who could throw a forward pass last year is the main reason we lost that game. We have a healthy Dylan Gabriel going into this game, and then Jackson Arnold backing him up. So Dylan Gabriel's performance against Iowa State, it was nothing to ignore. His stat line in that game, 26 of 39, 366 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. The interception wasn't so much on him as much as it was on Jalil Farouk, who cut at the wrong point in the route, allowing the defensive back to undercut the route. But he's having great game after great game after great game after great game. I don't understand the people out there who are hating so much on him, because he is the reason our offense is so successful right now. We know the run game hasn't been doing it for us. He has been.
Yeah, that's true. Talking about the game last year, I don't know that I would go so far as to say he's the reason we lost. I think us not having our normal starting quarterback there was a big factor, but it's hard to give up 49 points and win a ball game. Seeing how we were last year, I don't know that we're putting up 49 points. I think we probably still lose that game last year, even if Gabriel's healthy. Does Texas get off to such a start that they're able to put us in such a deep hole early on because we can't score? I don't know. But,
That's what I was saying.
I maintain there that it's hard to, in this day and age, it's hard to give up 49 points and win a ball game. So I think the biggest area we've seen the improvement now coming into this year over last year is the fact that we have something of a defense on the field. We have a defense that's giving up just a smidge over 300 yards a game. Texas giving up just under 300 yards a game. Our offense is productive. Like you said, Emmett Jones, he's been the master recruiter for us since he came in. There's him on the offensive side, DeMarco Murray, and we got Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis on the defensive side. So huge playmakers on both sides of the ball now, and I think that's where you're going to see the biggest difference. I don't know about you, Chris, but the defensive lines, I'm really excited to see what the slugfest looks like between the different defensive lines against our offenses this week. Because Texas, Texas has some big guys there on the defensive line. They are second. They're third in the Big 12 in sacks per game, getting 13 sacks, not per game, but they've got 13 sacks on the season so far. Behind just TCU and K-State. OU comes in ninth there. Everywhere else, though, that matters, points allowed and yards allowed, OU and Texas share either the number 1 or number 2 spots there. OU's number 1 on points allowed per game. Texas number 1 on yards allowed per game. Those are just in the Big 12 conference. But seeing both teams have a defense, it's really exciting to me. I love defensive ball.
I love defensive ball. I love even ball. I've told you before, my ideal football game is like that Patriots Seahawks Super Bowl final score 28-24. I like seeing defense good enough to shut down offenses in big moments. I like seeing offenses good enough to go down and win the game. And I think that's what we have this year. The defensive line for Texas is really good. The defensive line for Oklahoma is really good. What's funny is the difference in where their emphases are. Is Texas, their emphasis is on the defensive tackles. They have some really big boys up there who just blow up the interior of the offensive line. OU has some nice defensive tackles, but where our defense really exceeds against the run is with the linebackers and the defensive ends. We shut down the perimeter and force them to go up the middle where there's a linebacker waiting for them, where Danny Stutzman is there waiting for him. And we all know that the way he's been playing, Danny Stutzman is the last person you want to try and run past. I put up a statistic earlier. I'm going to get it pulled up real quick. It's pretty interesting about the defenses that OU and Texas have gone up against. Speaking of which, and that kind of brings me to each team's offensive line. Texas has had a nice offensive line this year. Oklahoma has had a nice offensive line. Neither team, I'd say, has an elite offensive line. But here's the thing that kind of makes me slightly more encouraged about the rushing performance that we've put up lately. When it comes to the opponents that OU and Texas have each faced and their current rankings right now against the run, Texas's opponents' rush defense, their average ranking, according to the NCAA, is 78.8. The defensive lines we've been going up against have an average ranking of 55.5. We've been going up against better defensive lines almost every week of the year. To give you the exact numbers, Texas went up against Rice week 1. Rice has the number 63 rush defense. Alabama has the number 34 rush defense. Those are the 2 better rushing defenses Texas has gone up against. But then Wyoming, Baylor, and Kansas, respectively, are 95th, 113th, and 89th. We've gone up against number 100 Arkansas State, number 42 SMU, number 47 Tulsa, number 37 Cincinnati, number 53 Iowa State. So we've gone up against higher caliber rushing defenses, and we're still putting up 157 and a half rushing yards per game. So both of the lines really are going to be interesting. There's really good defensive lines compared with nice offensive lines. There's just no way of knowing how this game is going to go.
Yeah, it's the closest to a toss-up game that I can remember since 2008, probably. It's crazy the overhaul that both teams have undergone coming into this year. Seeing Texas a couple years ago just waste away after the Red River game. Caleb Williams leads that comeback. And then last year, OU kind of implodes after Kansas State. Lays an egg against Texas, and then it was kind of all over from there. Seeing both teams unbeaten coming into this game, both highly ranked, seeing that there's skin in the game for both teams. It's a refreshing change of pace. I saw earlier Baker Mayfield's going to be our guest picker at College Game Day. That's going to be pretty exciting. I'm sure the Texas fans are going to, they're not gonna love that. I
especially
can't even
considering they're
feign
the
that
home
one.
team.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually have a couple interesting OU Texas trivia questions. I want to see if you know the answer to.
Let's hear 'em.
Since the 2015 season, how many times has the team wearing their home jersey won the Red River rivalry?
What is that, 8 seasons since then?
Yes, but remember 9 matchups because of the 2018 season, meeting up with
Yeah.
them in the Big 12 championship.
Probably 7, 6 or 7.
The amount of times that the team wearing their home jersey has won is twice. In 2016, OU was wearing their home jerseys against Texas and they won. And in 2020, OU was wearing their home jerseys and they won. 2015, Texas beat us. 2017, we beat Texas. 2018, Texas was wearing their home jersey in the regular season matchup. They won. They were also wearing it in the Big 12 championship. We won. I'm sorry, we were wearing our home jerseys in the regular season matchup in 2018. They won. Vice versa. Then 2019, 2021, OU won. Last year, Texas won. So OU is wearing their away jerseys going into tomorrow. Take with that what you will.
I feel good
This-
about that. I got that question right.
The next question I have for you.
'Kay.
The last time both teams were undefeated going into the Red River game was 2011. The last year Brent Venables was the defensive coordinator. What was the final score of that game?
Oh, gee. It's like 65-17.
55-17, with the defense scoring 3 of those touchdowns.
Yeah, that was a good game. That was a
Yeah.
good game.
We kind of fell apart after it, but that was a good game.
Well, I think my eye this week is most on the secondary.
Yeah.
Them working in conjunction with the defensive line. It's kind of like internal complementary ball almost, the complementary nature within one side of the defense. I think this week we're going to have to make Quinn Ewers work for it. He can't sugarcoat it at this point. He's an excellent quarterback. He's playing ball just about as well as anybody else in the country right now. He and Dylan Gabriel both are. They're both at the top of their respective games. Both of them have some throws they miss. They're going to have some throws they'll want back. But neither quarterback really fares terribly well under pressure. And I think if our defensive line is able to break the seam of their offensive line a little bit, I saw this. I don't know if you saw the OU football videos on Twitter with Bud, Barry, and Brent all talking in the coach's office, but talking about the double cat blitz from, I think that it was that 2011 game you mentioned where they run that.
It was the game against Vince Young in 2004.
Where they run that 25, 30 times in that game, and you see the results from it. They were able to hold Texas to next to nothing because they couldn't throw the ball, couldn't run it very well. That's the sort of thing we're going to need to get. We're going to need the defensive line complementing the secondary. Defensive line's going to have to get pressure so that yours is forcing those throws earlier, and the secondary is going to have to be ready. Texas has a very fast, very elite group of wide receivers, led by the man Xavier Worthy. He's a dangerous guy to get left alone on a football field. So our guys have got to be ready. We got to be loaded, and have to be ready to play ball because Texas. I'm not ready to say Texas is back, but I am ready to say that Texas looks very different than what we've seen, and OU certainly looks different from last year. So I think both teams are in a position to win this game. Who are you really looking out for this week?
I'm looking out for our offensive line and the team as a whole, and I'll get to that here in just a second. The offensive line, the reason I'm putting such an emphasis on them is because Texas has a really good defensive line. They have a really good defensive line. And OU's running game, to say it's been lackluster, that's kind of a compliment. They're getting better each week. They looked pretty good against Iowa State. But we need to have that breakout game. And if you remember correctly, we did in 2020. First 3 games of the season in 2020 were 1-2. We can't seem to run the ball effectively. And they were saying OU has to start running the ball if they're going to beat Texas. Because that year, Texas seemed loaded and we looked horrible. Well, come the OU Texas game, that's when we figured everything out on the ground. We ran them into submission. We ended up winning that game in 4 overtimes. So I really want to see our offensive line run the ball, help with the run game, that is. And our running backs, they need to do a better job of breaking tackles. Marcus Major needs to focus less on making all these cuts around the field and more on just getting downfield. Sometimes those cuts help. Half the time he's done them, they don't. I know that they've said we're going to see a lot more of Gavin Sawchuk this week, so I'm interested to see how that's going to pan out.
Real
But
quick, while you're on the running game, we're averaging, it's almost deceptive. It's kind of funny because I think most OU fans would agree with you right now that we're not running the ball very well. When you look at the numbers, 199 attempts for just shy of 800 yards. We're averaging right at 4 yards a carry on the season, averaging 158 a game. We've got 11 rushing touchdowns, so we're pulling in pretty much 2 rushing touchdowns a game. We'll see. We'll see if
yeah,
the stats or the eye test is more prevailing this week. But just an interesting stat to chew on there.
that definitely is interesting. And when I say the team as a whole, Steve Sarkisian has really taken the reputation he's had the past few years and flipped it on its side. 2021 and a lot of 2022, Texas would look great in the first half and just have a complete and total collapse in the second half. I mean, they've looked horrible in the second half of games. This year, they have turned that around. Let's look at the game against Rice. They ended up winning that game. Well, at halftime, they were only winning 16-3. They didn't look good at all. Final score of that game, 37-10. So next we go up to the Alabama game. That game against Alabama, they're winning 13-6 at halftime. Their offense could barely get moving. Final score, 34-24 Texas. Then you go to the Wyoming game. Going into the fourth quarter, they are tied at 10 against Wyoming. Final score, 31-10 Texas. Baylor, they dominated them the whole game. But the Kansas game at halftime, it was 13-7 Texas. Final score, 40-14. So we know that Steve Sarkisian has figured out how to make those second half adjustments. We know that his team is not going to get tired unless we make them tired. So what we need is for OU to get that tough physical nature that they've had all season and keep it going for all 4 quarters. Make it to where the offensive line is still pushing around the defensive line 8 minutes into the fourth quarter. Make it to where our wide receivers are still going up and making nice contested catches deep into the game. Make it to where our linebackers are still making sure tackles every time, to where our defensive backs aren't blowing coverages in the fourth quarter. If we can go out and play 4 tough, gritty, blue-collar quarters of football, I think OU really has a chance to not just beat Texas, but beat them by multiple scores.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. If OU wins this game, looking ahead at the rest of the schedule, we have home games against Central Florida, West Virginia, and TCU, and then we go to Lawrence, Kansas. We go to Stillwater, and we go to play BYU. Out of those 6 games, I'd say we've got a better than 90% chance of winning every one of them. I don't really look at any one of those games and think, wow, that's going to be a tough game. UCF I had as a bit of a trap game earlier this year for OU. Watching them through the first few weeks of the season has not impressed me very
Well, they have
much.
a solid offense. It's just their defense is horrible.
Yeah, well, we saw where that got them against Baylor.
Gosh.
If OU loses, I think looking at the remainder of this schedule, granted, coming into the season, I don't know that there were many playoff hopes for us. I think those have kind of developed with our with our play through the season so far. I think if we lose to Texas, we're effectively out of any playoff conversation because really the one good team that will have played the whole season we lost. We'll get a second crack at them if we win out. We'll get to play them in the Big 12 title, and if we were to win that one, that would revitalize it. But I think for all intents and purposes, we'd be out of contention there. Texas is going to be in a similar boat. Texas is going to have to win the game to keep their playoff hopes alive, and they will have to hold us off again in the Big 12 title. So it'll be interesting to see. Are there any games remaining on our schedule that really concern you? Any that look like they're trap games, maybe?
There are, and I'll get to that here in just a second. Kind of going off what you just said about their playoff chances if OU or Texas wins this weekend. I think also a lot of it depends on how close the game is. We saw a couple years ago in the 2020 season, Georgia versus Alabama. I think it was number 1 versus number 3 or something, and or number 2 versus number 3. And it was a game where it was very clearly two great teams going at it. And Georgia's ranking, despite losing, didn't change. I think if OU and Texas go out there and they put together just a great game of football, the final score is settled by 6 or 7 or fewer points. I mean, it really comes down to the last play. I think whoever loses still has a chance to make it to the playoffs, whether that's OU or Texas, especially Texas because of where they're ranked right now. They're ranked number 3. If we beat them, odds are we jump them in the rankings. But if it's a really close game the whole time, it comes down to the final play, and it's a good game of football, not a sloppy game of football, I think we jump up to like number 5 and they'd fall to number 6. I mean, this is two really good teams, and I think that could also play a role in the playoff chances. But of course, we'll see. We'll see. UCF, I still have as a trap game because they're while their defense isn't great, their offense, they really have a really good offense. If I remember correctly, they're one of the top offenses in the Big 12 right now. And they have a really good quarterback. They have a really good group of receivers, a good running back. They're a good team that you can't really afford to overlook. They kind of appear to be Kansas State this year. Or at least the Kansas State on our roster, a team that doesn't seem like they'd be great, but all it takes is one bad play against them and suddenly we're losing 31-13. So I think we need to watch out for them. Kansas definitely, especially if they have Jalen Daniels back. The main game that I think we should look out for other than those, and you might laugh at me when I say this, but just bear with me, that's Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is horrible this year.
I am laughing.
But we play them in Stillwater, and if there's one thing we've learned over the past few years, don't use the beginning of the season against Oklahoma State. I think I've referenced this a couple times over the past few weeks, but 2021 season, Oklahoma State only wins by 7 against a bad FCS team in Missouri State. Then they go up against Tulsa at home and barely hold them off. They're losing for most of that game. It takes a miracle pretty much to win the game. Come the end of the season, they're 11-1 in the Big 12 championship, playing for a spot in the college football playoff. The college football playoff is very clearly out of the question for them this year, but you never know what Oklahoma State team is going to show up. And I think, especially given that it's at home, it's at home in November in Stillwater it's at home for them. I mean, I wouldn't mark that game off yet. I think we will probably beat them by 40, but I think we need to be careful.
I will mark that game off in black Sharpie and not think twice about it. Last trip back a little bit to what you said there about OU and Texas. We got to remember we're not Georgia and Alabama. Georgia and Alabama are two really perennial brands of football over the last number of years. OU coming off of a season where we dropped so many one-score games. Texas coming off multiple rebuilding years. I just don't see any way that one of these teams loses this game by any margin and has better than a 30% shot at getting into a playoff. I don't see it. I think they got to win, and if the one that loses Saturday takes home the Big 12 title, that's going to complicate things a little bit, and could end up knocking the Big 12 out of the playoff altogether because the ACC is strong this year. Pac-12 is strong. The SEC is in a bit of a down year, but they've been who they've been for so long now. They get a lot of benefit of the doubt there. As we close up, Chris, your score prediction for this Saturday, who's winning and what's the score?
I'll make this fast. I don't think you can ever accurately predict this game. You just never know what's going to happen in the Red River. I think OU wins it 27-24.
I like it. I've got OU squeaking one out, 34-27.
2019 score.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see if we can pull that off and get ourselves back into the national conversation. I think if we win the Texas game, it's all up from here. I don't see anywhere else for it to go.
Yeah.
So let's hope for the best there. You've been listening to Sam and Chris on the Crimson Creed podcast. Make sure to check out Chris's blog at Soonerpocket.com. He's got lots of great content on there, good analysis of the ball games this season. So it'll be exciting. Everybody tune in this Saturday to OU Texas. Let's be loud, whether you're in the stadium, whether you're on your couch at home. Support our Sooners there on the field. Hope for a win, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Boomer Sooner.
Boomer Sooner.